I had some olives and something called spanakopita, and maybe that gives away my origins. I'm in Athens, Greece.
Wonderful. I have fond memories of eating spanakopita on the daily. I I've spent some time in Greece in the last few years on rock climbing trips, and I was on this island called Kalymnos, and there was this incredible bakery. It's a heavy breakfast, but if you're out exerting and moving the whole day, then I think it provides, let's say, sustenance. At least that's what I like to say.
Yeah, I ran a 50-mile race this past weekend, so I'm still post carbo loading, let's say, and so I'm indulging in the good Greek bakery items like spanakopita.
Amazing. Well, you certainly earned it, and your body is likely thanking you for the tasty calories that a good Greek pastry shop can provide. And I know, Dean, you appear to have evolved, or you experiment with your nutrition, and you've tried different things. So I would love to get a little bit into that later. But I am fascinated about this time that you're spending in Greece. I know you are involved as an ambassador for the country. So please tell us what's it about.
Well, I mean, I'll start by saying that I'm 100% Greek. So by heredity, I'm Greek, and I've was born and raised in California. So I'm Greek American, as they say, or Greek Californian. And I've always vowed to get back to my ancestral homeland. I loved California. I love living in the U.S. Uh, you and I have a lot of things in common. I mean, California, especially in the heyday when I grew up in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. The windsurfing was amazing, the surfing, the rock climbing, the whole movement. Snowboarding came about. So many innovations, outdoor innovations, I was a part of, and I loved it. And I'm grateful for those years. But I also studied classics. So I studied, the birth of the marathon, the birth of democracy, the birth of Western thought, and which started here in Greece. And I've always vowed to come back and, throw myself into it wholeheartedly. And that's why I'm here.
Well, we certainly have a few things in common. And, I read Ultramarathon Man like maybe 15 years ago. I can't remember when it came out, but then I went back and reread it. And I was transported, Dean, because in the last decade or so, I've spent a lot of time, not just in San Francisco, but in a lot of the areas around. And I almost felt like I was reliving traveling through Northern California, through your eyes, through your storytelling. But coming back to just this little bit about your role, you are like some kind of an official ambassador for Greece. You're living there now. Are you promoting Greek tourism? What are you doing there?
Yeah, I'm the ambassador of Greek tourism, and I also work with some of the municipalities like Marathon to increase both the visibility and tourism to Marathon. A lot of marathoners, which are millions across the globe, don't realize that Marathon is actually a place, and it's a great place. It's a on the eastern shore of Attica, outside of Athens, and it's a beautiful beach, and it's the place that launched the marathon in 490 BC. So uh, you'd be amazed if you went there nowadays. Not a lot has changed in 2,500 years. So that's good and bad, but a lot of the infrastructure, needs improvement. Uh, you know, uh, it's Greece, and Greece in a lot of ways is a second world country, believe it or not, kind of still stuck in the byroads of the east and the west, and not having moved forward quite as as rapidly as a lot of the other European nations, EU nations. So I'm trying to promote both, uh, tourism to Greece, gastronomy to Greece, uh, culturalism to Greece, just kind of, hoping to bring more people to Greece to realize what a great place it is, and the significance that this little small country plays in all of our lives in the modern West.
That's incredible. I feel that they could not have chosen a better spokesman, not just for the country, but for what Greece represents in the modern world. And you're right, like people seem to forget that these, let's say, household terms like the marathon or even the Olympics, they came from Greece. And yes, running and marathon running are deeply connected with their roots in Greece. And Dean, you are such a great storyteller. So would you behoove us for a moment and share the origin story from Greece of the marathon?
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. I think it's a fascinating story. And it started again in 490 BC. What happened is that the Persians invaded Greece, and they landed at a place called Marathon. And the translation of the word marathon in Greek is field of fennel, like the herb fennel, because where the Persians landed was a big coastal field that was filled with wild fennel, which grows all over Greece. So the Athenians realized that they were badly outnumbered by the Persians that were invading. And the Athenians back in that day in 490 BC were not a military might, so to speak. They were more intellectually endowed, philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers. So they knew they were going to get defeated by the Persians, and that they needed to recruit another Greek city-state to help them fight. And if you've seen the movie 300, who's the most badass fighting force in ancient Greece? The Spartans. And so uh, the general for the Athenians dispatched this runner, Phidippides, to run to Sparta from Athens to recruit the Spartans into battle. And that's about 153 miles. So this is 490 BC, mind you. And this guy, Phidippides, took off running for Sparta. He got there the day after setting out, so roughly sub 36 hours, uh, which is phenomenal to think that, that's a really respectable time to run 153 miles nowadays. But he ran, probably barefoot. He didn't have consistent, resupplies of water. There was no such thing as a power bar. There's no
Or an aid
electrolyte,
station?
an aid station, or a headlamp. I mean, how did he navigate? How did he see at night? It's unbelievable that he made it that quickly. But anyway, he got to Sparta, and he explained to the Spartans that the Persians had invaded, and that they needed to come help their Athenian brethren to drive out the Persians. The Spartans said, "We're sure, we'll come help you, and we'll bring our forces, but we can't leave for 6 days." And he said, "Why?" And he said, "Because the moon is not full, and Spartan religion forbids us from leaving for battle until there's a full moon." So Phidippides was in a pickle. The Spartans were coming, but they were delayed by 6 days, and he had to go back and tell his Athenians that what was going on. So he woke up the next morning and he ran back to Athens, into the battlefield of Marathon, to tell the Athenians, "Hey, the Spartans are coming. They're just not coming for 6 days." As things transpired, the Athenians decided they couldn't wait for 6 days, because every day the Persians were reinforcing, their position on the beach of Marathon. So the Athenians invaded. They somehow drove off the Persians. They won the Battle of Marathon. Afterward, they dispatched Phidippides for one last run, and he ran from the battlefield to the Acropolis, and he proclaimed Nike, Nike, or Nike, Nike, which means victory, victory. We are victorious. and then of course he famously died. And it just as an aside, that's where Nike got their name, their footwear. Phil Knight got the name of the Nike footwear brand. So that's the backstory of the marathon. And it's to me it's fascinating to go to these places that Herodotus writes about 2,500 years ago.
Amazing. What a great story, and naturally heroic. The origins of marathon running. And actually, you just blew my mind by explaining that the term marathon comes from the herb fennel, because I am from India, a country that loves its fennel spice. So we have, yeah, I had no idea that the origins, or at least I don't know where fennel originated from, but fennel and marathon again are like connected in this insane way. Dean, I have to ask this. So you are in Greece now, and you are maybe, like you said, retracing some of those ancient roots. Do you feel different running in Greece and the US or anywhere else?
I mean, there's a certain energy and a power in Greece you don't feel anywhere else. And I've run all around the world. I've run on all seven continents twice, and Greece is very unique in that regard. When you run up to the top of Mount Penteli, which is not far from my house, you can see the Bay of Marathon on one side, and you can see Athens and the Acropolis on the other side. So you can see all of the ancient routes, that Phidippides followed, and as well as the marble for the Parthenon was harvested from Mount Penteli. You can see exactly where they took the marble. You can still see the big cuts, the marble cuts in the side of the mountain, and the white marble rock, and wonder, just be filled with wonder at how 2,500 years ago, before there was tractors, there was no motorized transportation, how they got these huge multi-ton pieces of marble, white marble, to the Acropolis from this mountain. It's mind-boggling how these engineers were so ahead of their time so far ago. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not just me knowing the history. I bring friends here from the U.S. that really are you look a little bit clueless on everything, and they say the same thing. Like, wow, there's an energy here. There's this. You've been to Greece. You climbed. How did it feel climbing here?
Oh my God. You, yeah, I feel transported hearing you talk, Dean. So one of my trips, I was just up the coast from Athens, on the Peloponnese coast, in this little town called Linidio. And it does feel that I was in some historic place, because there's this beautiful little village surrounded by limestone mountains. The village is ancient. I don't know how old. And as you're climbing, you can look over the horizons. Not only do you see mountains and cliffs, obviously a beautiful tree line, but you see little outcroppings of ancient structures, you know, and then beyond that, you see the ocean. And it does feel that, like, I don't know, like you're participating in some like ancient activity. Like, yeah, it was awesome. I am planning a return trip again this winter, and yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorite places in the world to visit now and rock climb.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great climbing in Greece. I mean, there's just a lot of great outdoor sports in Greece, and it's Greece still lags behind most of Western civilization as far as outdoor activity. I mean, I still rarely see people on the trails. Yeah, it's still kind of a throwback. Like the whole outdoor scene here is so small compared to the U.S. I mean, when I go back to the U.S. in the summer and I go to the Rockies or I go to the Sierra Nevada, I can't believe you go to the Mount Whitney trailhead. I mean, you need to apply for a permit, 2 years in advance. Here, you can climb any mountain you want on any day, and you rarely see other people.
It really so I'm curious, I mean, why do you think that is, given Greece's abundance of natural terrain, which lends itself to all kinds of sports, right? Running being such a big one, but also niche sports like rock climbing. All the oceans provide avenues for, let's say, water sports. So, do you have a theory on why Greece is just now catching on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when the Industrial Revolution took place, Greece was kind of left behind. And that is really there, the mid 1800s, where Greece kind of became a throwback nation. I mean, I remember my grandmother, who had migrated to Greece. When I said, "Hey, I want to go to Greece," she said, "No, you don't. Everyone's poor and it's dirty." So she left at a time where it was tough. I mean, just putting food on the table was a chore. Greece was left behind in the Industrial Revolution and is just now catching up. And many of the stereotypes that have long ago faded away in the U.S. are still prominent here. I mean, in the U.S., for instance, about 50-50 of the marathon runners are female versus and male, and more like 60% of the half marathoners are female. In Greece, the numbers are way smaller. I mean, I think 10% of the marathoners are female, and maybe 15 to 20% of the half marathoners are female. So it's still very backwards in that regard. Like, women, are seen as household keepers and mothers. But it's changing. It's changing with people like me that are bringing in more, westernized thoughts to Greece. So I think it'll catch up rapidly. And the outdoor scene. I mean, it's outsiders largely coming in and saying, "Wow, look at that rock, look at that face. Let's go climb that." So come back.
Greece is on its way. I can feel it, to reclaim its place amongst the, let's say, top sporting nations. One last question. Talking about Greece is so, yeah, it's so fun. I don't want to take all our time, but what's your favorite thing about Greece, Dean, besides the running, of course?
The food. Come on, Greek food is good. Yeah, and it's not, I mean, we talked about spanakopita, but I mean, even just there's something here they call horta. I don't know if you remember that. It's basically wild greens, boiled wild greens, and just the grass itself has such flavor. It's so unique. It's almost like a nutty almond flavor or a bitter flavor. So just the food here alone, the actual food without any sauces or gravies or anything to complicate it, it just tastes so good. I mean, an apple, a fig. I can just go on and on, but just you probably had some of the food yourself and thought it's extraordinary.
The food is delectable. But talking of grasses, one of my fonder memories is of indulging in this delicate type of mountain tea that
Uh,
the local farmers market would sell in Linedio. Like, you could just tell that maybe the people selling it had harvested and dried the tea themselves. The tea is so flavorful. I have tried vainly to look for it here in the US. So and another thing I need to do when I go back is to find that tea.
the mountain tea. I'm glad you experienced that. I have it every night. Yeah,
Oh,
it's wild. It's wild harvested. I mean, yeah, and I mean, they sell it for like €2 for a kilo. Literally, I mean, because you pick it on the side of the road. Yeah,
amazing, amazing. Dean, we raced a bit ahead. There still might be some people who are listening and don't know who you are. So, who are you, Dean, and what do you do?
I guess I'm best described as an ultra marathoner. So I run, yeah, you know, ultra, the suffix ultra means beyond, or the prefix ultra means beyond in Latin. So an ultra marathon is anything beyond a marathon. A marathon is 26.2 or 42.2 kilometers, or 26.2 miles. So an ultra marathon might be 50 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles. Some of the things I've done are not just races. I mean, I ran 50 marathons in all the 50 US states in 50 consecutive days. You know, I've run a marathon at the South Pole. I've run across Death Valley in the middle of summer. So I'm an ultra marathoner. I'm also a writer. I've written 5 books. A few of them have been New York Times bestsellers. I'm an entrepreneur. I've done some investing in like startup companies in footwear and healthy, active living mostly. Uh, Other than that, I'm just a dude. I mean, I've got a few degrees. One in business, one in biochemistry, one in food science, one in classical studies. Uh, I don't know. I'm just a normal guy, I guess, with a curiosity. You know, hopefully I'm still somewhat like a child. I think I still have a great curiosity for life.
Thank you, Dean. Yeah, badass. You have developed your life around running, but in this interesting and diverse way. I mean, it comes across in your speaking, in your writing, on how you have taken this pure love of the sport and you have seeded that in all kinds of ways. Before we talk about your journey as a runner, I thought we should at least spend a minute here talking about the type of running you're doing these days. You just mentioned that you did a big race over the weekend. Mind telling us what that was about?
Oh yeah, the equivalent of Fourth of July was just this past weekend in Greece. It's March 25th is Greek Independence Day. So the place where the Greek Revolution was born, there's a race from that place, like a 50-mile round of this peninsula called the Mani Peninsula in the southwestern section of the Peloponnese, which you've been to, of Greece, and essentially I would call it the Big Sur coastline of Europe. It's stunning. I mean, it's mountainous. It's big, sheer drops into the sea. So it was a 50-mile race from Aeropoli, where the revolution began, all the way down the Mani Peninsula and back, and finishing at Aeropoli. So it was historic as well as scenic. Yeah.
Sounds absolutely gorgeous. That coast is enchanting. How did you fare in that race, Dean?
I did pretty well. I mean, I won my age group, but I always win my age group. And no one really cares, who wins your age group except for people in your age group. So that worked out well. I mean, it took me just I think nine hours and 20 minutes. So I mean, I was in the front. I wasn't first, but I wasn't last. I was in the front of the pack, let's say, and pretty happy with the outcome.
From somebody who's never run an ultra, Dean, I think just finishing an ultra, like basically winning something huge. Talking of age, how old are you now?
I'm going to take my fifth, the right to remain silent. My fifth. Yeah,
You know,
I'm I'm over, I'm over 60. Let's just say that. Yeah.
I appreciate it, and I apologize for the rudeness. Sometimes I think that hosting the Ageless Athlete podcast emboldens me to sometimes ask, private questions. But let's just say this: you have been running ferociously for a long time, and you have this beautiful story, Dean, where you had this aha moment at the age of 30? You were living, let's say, a more mainstream life in the city we both call home in San Francisco. And it's been a long time since that night. And I'm just curious if that night, your birthday night, and the impromptu 30-mile run that you went on had not happened, I am just wondering, where do you think your life would be today?
I think I'd be probably overweight and driving a red Ferrari, bald, like a middle-aged man, that is bored as hell with his life. Yeah.
You are funny and modest, but it seems like you have always been naturally sporty. Okay, so let's ask you this. So you ran 30 miles off the couch. You wake up sore, but exhilarated.
And then your partner picks you up, and then you come back and you say, well, I think I'm going to keep doing this. What was their reaction?
They were uh, uh, yeah, supportive, but a little bit dubious whether I could make a go of it, I think. Uh, Very supportive, but let's put a timestamp on this. I mean, this is back in the early 90s. And there weren't people, kind of the gig economy didn't exist back then. I mean, there weren't people doing podcasts like there weren't people living the life like you're living. Let's be honest. It was very less common. Nowadays it's commonplace for people to have a second job or a side gig, or even make it their entire life their side gig. But back then it was unheard of. So people knew, like, there's no money in ultra marathoning. Like, if you win, you get the same belt buckle or medal as everyone else. You don't get a big prize purse. How are you going to keep the lights on? How are you going to put food on the table? So there's all of those doubts, which I had myself. And I thought, you're either going to make a go of it and look back 20 years or 30 years from now and say, wow, that was a great ride, or you're going to fail and say, well, at least I tried. But I thought, if you don't try, then you're going to look back your whole life and say, I wish I would have tried.
You are correct, Dean. Thanks for reminding us that time has sped by and we are living in a very different age. And yeah, even now when I tell my folks that I'm just gonna, live on the road and climb and do this podcast, it gets. I mean, they have come around and they actually listen to the podcast, so it's been a fun journey. But back then, you took this big leap of faith. After that run happened, you went and started training properly. You kind of went from, let's say, strength to strength. I'm just curious as to how the rest of your life evolved, because putting the kind of time and grit into training and running ultras, it's a lifestyle sport. It's not like you can just go out for a 30-minute run in the morning and call it a day. You were running a lot, you were training a lot, sometimes you were running all night. So can you describe to us how your life was like back in those days? Because a lot of our listeners are people, let's say, kind of, in our age group, who are trying to figure out how do they put time into their athletic practice given all these demands between family time. So yeah, talk to us, Dean. How did you kind of thread that needle? What was it that helped you keep all of that going?
Yeah, I mean, you make sacrifices. So you get up early in the morning, and you train. On the weekends, you don't do things a lot of other people are doing. You don't go to concerts. You train. So thankfully, I'm an introvert by nature, so I don't mind being by myself. I didn't really have much of a social life. I mean, my whole social life was around my training. and my family, and that fit me by nature. So, I think a lot of people that get into ultramarathoning, it's who they are. It's kind of consistent with their inner being. I do a lot of all night runs. I mean, if you're going to run an ultra marathon, 100-mile race, you're going to be up all night. So it's, you need to train by running all night. So I just, put on a headlamp and you put on a hydration pack, throw some money in there and just take off and go running for, 12, 14 hours, and love it. The encounters you have in the middle of the night out, on some backcountry road are interesting. I mean, with nature, with drivers passing by, giving you funny looks, and you just have a lot of it's to me, it's very it's a form of entertainment. It's not what most people consider entertainment, but I think it's very entertaining.
100%. I mean, there are places in the world where no, let me rephrase that. Particularly in a country that is so car centric like the US, just seeing somebody out on a highway or a street at an odd hour is strange. And yeah, I can only imagine, yeah, the wonder and surprise that you created during those epic long runs. Here's a contrarian question. Did you ever feel guilty about putting so much time into running?
Maybe a little bit, but I don't think so much. I mean, I involved my family whenever I could, which was often. So, my kids have been, I think, on 4 or 5 different continents. I mean, we've been to Australia together, we've been to South America together, we've been to Europe together, Canada. So I always involved my family, and I always made it nice for them. I didn't just drag them there so that, when we're going on another trip, they'd be saying, "Oh, Dad's going to drag us here and there again." They'd look forward to it, which they did. So my kids got to experience the world uh, through the adventures we were on, which was a very unusual education, but I think probably the best education you could ever want is a practical education. Traveling is a unique experience unto itself. The things you pick up on that you just can't be taught in a classroom. So some of me, I guess, at points felt a little bit guilty, but when it became more of my life, like that's how I was paying the bills, it was a little less guilt. I still prided myself on, making sure our household was a 50-50 split. I did my share of diaper changes and dinner making and toilet cleaning and everything else, which I prided myself on that. I held up my own, and so I think when I look back on the way I conducted my life, I'm pretty proud of it, actually.
Wonderful, Dean. And it sounds like that was one of your, let's say, not so secrets, which is um, taking your family with you so they could experience these places and these moments. Again, it is so, yeah, it is so incredible that you were, let's say, a full-time athlete by most definitions, but you were also balancing this career in corporate America and running and managing a family. Any hard-won strategies on finding that balance, things that you did that the rest of us can perhaps learn from?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I didn't have a social life, but I wasn't naturally a social person, so I didn't feel like I was fighting it. But something's got to give. So if you've got a social life, make your training partners, your social friends, because that's what it's going to come down to. I would also say, you said finding balance. I don't know if I had so much balance in my life. I would say more it's creative or chaotic harmony, if you will. So, in the chaos and knowing that things are moving at breakneck speed, that is frenetic, that some things are going to fall apart, other things are going to come together. but just being committed to the fact that you're going to do your best, and it might not always be perfect, but it's the best you can do given everything that's going on.
For sure. And well, one thing, maybe to some advantage you had back in those days, you did not have the distractions, or at least less of the distractions of the internet and social media. And I think that if more of us would just try to reduce or eliminate time that they spend on their devices, I think it is amazing how much room that frees up to pursue an actual goal. Dean, besides running, you have also expressed your talents as a writer. Like I said, I have learned a lot about ultra running in the last year or so since I started doing the show. But reading Ultra Marathon Man again took me deep into what it feels like. Because this is not just running, let's say, a marathon up and down city blocks. You describe, in one of your opening scenes, you describe the Western States run and the environments that you had to go through, like all kinds of physical environments, running from Tahoe to Auburn. So again, I'm going to ask you to jog your memory a bit again, which is out of all of these races and runs, and you've done so many of different kinds, um, can you pick one that may have left the biggest mark on you, uh, physically, emotionally, and maybe even spiritually, and tell us what happened?
Yeah, and I could talk about all kinds of crazy races I've done. I'll never forget there's a race called the Atacama Crossing, which is a 7-day self-supported 250-kilometer race across the Atacama Desert, which is the driest place on Earth. So Atacama is in Chile and South America, up against the Andes. And I remember asking the guy, when did it rain here last? He said, well, it hasn't. And I said, since when? He said, since we've been keeping records, like since mankind has been keeping records, they've never recorded rain here ever. So it's very, very dry. It was below freezing at night. Yeah, and you're sleeping in a tent on the ground, on basically on hard rocks. And then it was, over 100 degrees during the day. So that was quite a grueling race and a real test of perseverance. But I think running 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days was probably the most taxing because, just running one marathon is tough, and getting up and doing that 49 more days in a row was psychologically, it was hard to overcome sometimes. I remember on marathon 19, I thought I wasn't going to make it. Like at the halfway point, I thought I'm going to collapse right here. And then I started thinking I've got 31 more days with this. And so it's just so overwhelming psychologically to get through that one.
Yeah, I mean, 50 marathons in 50 states, because it's not just one run that you can complete. It's somehow pushed through. It is sort of this, sorry, but almost this Groundhog Day lifestyle where you have to wake up and you have to repeat this all over again. I also really enjoyed hearing about your South Pole adventure. I think what stood out to me on that one, Dean, is not just the running itself, but like so many of the logistics and the entrapment you guys felt. Can you talk to us a little bit about how challenging it was to plan and execute a race in some of the harshest environment that we know about?
Yeah, well, I mean, the itinerary was a 10-day itinerary. So I told my wife I'd be back to San Francisco in 10 days, and 30 days later, I stumbled back into town. So I learned a lot about Antarctica and how dangerous it is, actually. I'll just say dangerous. And looking back at things, it's amazing that we lived through that. I lived through that one, and some of the other runners, because we were stuck on the polar plateau, which is the most remote place on Earth, in negative 25-degree temperatures for 2 weeks, trying to run this race, just waiting for the weather to clear. And in Antarctica, it doesn't always clear. I mean, it rarely clears. We came to learn, but getting to the point where the organizers are saying, hey, this is not going to work, we're going to have to go. And us thinking, us runners thinking, well, we've been down here for so long, we put so much into this, we're not leaving. Those are the kind of circumstances where people get themselves killed. You're a climber. I mean, it's you're 100 meters from the summit, and the weather turns bad, and your instinct is, I'm so close, I'm just going to go bag that summit, and then you got to get back down. So how many people have lost their lives by doing desperate things like that, because they're weighing the stakes and how much they put into it. Like, I'm just going to finish this damn thing. But somehow we were able to do the marathon and get out of there unscathed, if you will, with a little frostbite. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and not only the effort and time that you put into the preparation, but also the fact that that particular opportunity will not likely present itself. Like, how often will you get a chance to go down to that extreme end of the planet and do this? So you kind of have to lay it all on the line. And
Well, I mean, there were supposed to be, we were told there'd be 40 to 50 intrepid runners from around the world to run this first ever, South Pole Marathon. And there were 3 of us. Yeah. And, and it was one and done. I mean, there's never been, it was supposed to be the inaugural race, like this ongoing series of runs, marathons to the South Pole. And that was the first and only and ever. It's just too dangerous an operation. They have marathons on Antarctica, but they're they're at the shoreline, where outside, not near the pole. And the coastline, because I've run on the coastline of Antarctica as well. It's much more temperate than the interior.
yeah, I was curious because they also have, people again accomplishing different kinds of, let's say, sporting feats. In Antarctica, you have people who have surfed the coastline. People have, they found waves. People have gone open water swimming. Also, there have been climbing expeditions. But what is the contrast again, Dean, between what it takes to be doing something which is like, hey, we did this in Antarctica versus we did this right at the pole?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, when I say I was at the South Pole, they say, oh, were there penguins and were there polar bears? And I kind of laugh, because one, there are no polar bears in Antarctica. They're in the northern hemisphere. But two, there's no penguins at the South Pole. I mean, there's not even bacteria at the South Pole. I mean, I remember the funniest thing, when I got back to San Francisco, I was shaving, and I had the window open, and I heard a bird chirping, and it struck me like, wow, that's such an unusual noise, because Antarctica, there's nothing alive at the South Pole. So we hadn't heard birds or seen any form of life, the whole time we were at the South Pole.
Wow, Dean, that paints a vivid picture of like some of these sights and sounds that we take so much for granted every day. You take that away from us, and we are not the same people. And that is perhaps a bit of a segue into talking about suffering. Long endurance sports, uh, such as ultra running, maybe in some ways the epitome of of this league of sports, um, requires a capacity to be able to literally just suffer. Uh, maybe the run across the Atacama, or maybe a different one. I'm curious, was there a race, Dean, that almost broke you?
I mean, and there's been many. There's a race called the Badwater Ultramarathon, which we talked about, which is 135 miles across Death Valley in the middle of summer. And I've done that race 10 times, and every time I thought I'm not going to make it. Like I'm done. I can't make it another 10 feet, let alone another 30 or 40 miles. So I think the appeal of that race to me, why I kept going back, is because I thought it's so uncertain. When the gun goes off to start that race, there's so much uncertainty that every time you finish it, you prove to yourself that you did something you thought was impossible. And people say, well, come on, you've done it 10 times. Like it's you know what it's all about. I do, but it's still the same challenge the 10th time as it was the first time. So that's what I love about ultra marathoning, is that you can never take it for granted. No matter how good you are, there's no certainty you're going to reach the finish line.
Absolutely. And I also sense that, you can be the most prepared person, but if you are in some of the environments that are as harsh as the ones that you just described, there's so much that is left to that moment, that condition. I know you have likely spoken about this before, but any couple of things you fall back on, Dean, when you encounter conditions, or let's say point of suffering which seems almost otherworldly? How have you found a way out?
Yeah, I mean, people sometimes ask me, what do you think about when things get really tough? And I tell them I don't. I mean, thinking is the problem. Don't think, just do. So I paid attention to what I do when things get really, really tough. And what I do is I don't think. I just execute. All I say to myself is take your next footstep to the best of your ability. Okay, take your next footstep to the best of your ability. I don't think about the future. I don't reflect on the past. I don't do anything except be in the here and now, the present moment of time, and put my next footstep in front of my next footstep. And it's not so easy to do because our minds, even when you're exhausted, our minds are so active. I mean, even now, as we're talking, you're thinking about 100 things. You're thinking about, where's my next client? What am I going to have for lunch? What's my next question for Dean? When's this podcast going to be over? But somehow quiet your mind and just focus on your next footstep. You can get through anything. And I've done it time and time again where I thought, I'm never going to get through this. And I've just said, don't think about it. Don't think about how much further you've got to go. Don't think about where the next aid station is. Don't think about what you're going to eat. Just be in the present moment of time and take your next footstep to the best of your ability.
It takes me back to my childhood a bit, when my parents would take us trekking and backpacking in the mountains. And the goal was to make it to the next tree. We were these, I don't know, my brother and I, these petulant, distracted kids. And the goal was to just make it to the next tree. And then the next tree. And then before you know it, we would, yeah, I sometimes wish that as adults, we would be again as or close to as impressionable as we were kids, and we would just listen to like a simple goal and try to maybe just follow on that goal. One thing also, Dean, I wanted to ask you is about, again, the relationship to the process over the years. So when we were exchanging notes, uh, we talked about getting beat up while surfing at Ocean Beach, the coastline and the surf break outside San Francisco, which both of us called our home. Um, I started surfing it at OB in 2008, soon after I moved to the city. And I just remember I loved all of those beatings, Dean. Like, you know how difficult getting out at OB is, even on, like, let's say a not so intense day. I loved all of that, right? I was learning every little wave battle through felt like a win. But now I don't seem to enjoy it as much. I have to confess, I don't look forward to, I'll sometimes not go out on those days when it looks like I might suffer more and I might not make it out. So, how has that relationship with, again, the fight changed for you, Dean, over the decades?
Yeah, the fight has changed in that, before I used to think about getting on the podium. Now I think about finishing the race. Like, can I get to the finish? So it's more now for me about longevity, about staying in the game. I've been doing this for over 3 decades. How many people do you know that have been professional athletes for 3 decades? It's unheard of. I mean, there's not a professional basketball player, you know, baseball player, whatever. I mean, there's guys, Tom Brady, right? He's been doing it for what, 12 years, 13 years, which is phenomenal. I mean, I've been ultra marathoning for over 30 years and I'm still doing it. So now, my challenge is just, can you persist? Can you keep doing this for another 20 years? Let's see how long you can go. And if you look at runners, it typically there's two things that happen. There's people that are really great when they're young, and then that's it. They can't run anymore. They burn out, or they get osteoarthritis, or that whatever. And then there's people that start late in life and they set like incredible age records. People like 75, running a sub-4-hour marathon. But there's rarely someone that's lasted for so long that's still kind of at the top of their game. So I'm trying to see how long this streak can last, and trying to, stay in the game for another 3 decades. I tell people my finish line's a pine box. When when you put me in my grave, I'm done.
Sure. And Dean, again, those decades of consistency, the fact that you just ran a race, a 50-miler just this past weekend, is what makes you such a compelling guest for Asia's athlete. Are you still surfing much?
Not, because I'm in Greece now most of the time, I'm not. But I windsurf, and I'm going to start foiling. So the windsurfing here is epic. And I have surfed in Greece, regular surf. I mean, anyone who's a surfer listening to this might say, "What? There's surf in Greece?" I mean, it's not, coming from California, it's not great surf in Greece, but there is surf in Greece. There's a couple islands, Crete, Ikaria, where there's good waves. I mean, there's paddling waves. So I've surfed head-high waves in Greece. I surfed a right point that was really nice. I mean, it's very hit or miss, very fickle. It doesn't break all the time, but it does once in a while, and it's certainly a lot less punishing than OB.
Sure thing. And I have heard about Ikaria. And yes, Greece has waves, but you kind of have to plan and strategize to be able to find those points of time when it might break in your favor. Dean, we are at an hour. So just a quick time check. If we want to take a break now and come back, or totally up to.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's possible, I think we should re-record. I mean, not re-record, but do a second recording. Maybe let's email again for some times that are available, and do it maybe at the same time next week, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can find a time next week.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you for your flexibility.
No, thank you, Dean. I get the chance to meet you again and ask you about your breakfast next time again.
Next time.
And we're jealous.
I enjoyed our conversation. I'll talk to you at our next interview. Enjoy Mexico.
Thanks a lot. Yeah,
Okay.
enjoy your
Good.
evening. Talk to you soon.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup, Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless.